Welcome to the Respecting the Beer podcast. My name is Gary Owens, and once again, I am with Bobby Fleshman and Allison McCoy-Fleshman. So we've talked a little bit about the origin story, how you got started in beer, your training in beer, your home brewing. You went to a brewing program, you became a master brewer, and then you moved to this place that you'd never been to before, Appleton, Wisconsin, and you make the decision to start a brewery. There's probably people out there who they like beer. They're home brewers, and maybe they have dreams of opening a brewery. What was that process like? And what did you have to go through? Because, you know, we were talking before that a lot of people that get into this are kind of naive as to what is actually involved in it. What was the process like?
Right.
Scary. It was
before
terrifying.
we get started, I want to say something about master brewer. I think it's something like 15 years in the industry before you can sit for that particular examination. And there's only Dan Carey in the state of Wisconsin with that. So I just want to and Allison may say, I'll accept it. But I just want to make sure that lexicon is sort of
That's true. There's a master brewer's program, and then there's a master brewer.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
There's some technical
All right, back to the show. So.
Yeah, we started a brewery. How did it feel? Where did we begin? Go.
So I was picking up all these pieces my whole life, ultimately became this brewery, but there was a bunch of gaps. As much as I was a master of all trades, or a jack of all trades, master of none, I mentioned in the previous episode, I had a fast track biology and chemistry. And then when we got here and decided to open this place, we had to decide on a location. And then we had to decide on how to get money to do anything with said location.
Oh my gosh, anything shiny is expensive. And so it's so expensive to start a brewery.
We had to find equipment.
Oh, so expensive.
Well, it goes on and on. So let's start with that. I had to get money, and half of the money, a portion of the money, came from our respective families, and they were. I will say they were pretty easy sell on this. Yeah,
they had each family had worked and had accrued some funds to help us out, and we all believed in Bobby. End stop. He was kind of the visionary behind it all, and so they invested. And from that, we were able to buy this building. Actually, this building came up for sale. Appleton Beer Factory was originally going to buy this building before they bought theirs. And so it had been vacant for many years. And it was actually Leah Fogel who said, hey, by the way, I think you should ask about buying that one behind us.
And they had thought about this building for their original
location. They even had plans for it.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, and so we inquired with the owner and were able to buy the building outright with the help of both of our parents.
And it was just a shelf at that point.
But
so this is like a 100-year-old building, roughly?
Yeah, it was built in 1921. It was originally Valley Dairy Products Dairy Company. And what was fun is during renovations, then we gutted it. There's a wonderful picture that we have hanging in the tap room. And you can see it where Bobby and you were so mad that day too, because I wanted to take a picture of us. And you're like, we don't have time for a picture. I was always documenting everything. Anyway, we're just standing in this gutted shell. And this is before we'd lowered the floor, but we just snapped this picture. And to see what it was when we bought it, it's just mind blowing how much work we put in. But this building, when we were doing renovations, we knew it was a dairy company, but we actually found a whole bunch of relics from the dairy company. But then there were these walls that were this cork, because at the time that was the insulation that they used.
The refrigerator.
And we found
all
these
ice blocks off of Lake Michigan to cool it.
And we found all these dairy caps that they would have used for the milk bottles. It was really fun, finding in the history of the building.
And it became a brewery in 1933.
And in our tap room, you can see a list of all the different things this building has been. And there's got to be about 25 different businesses have been in this building.
And we're the 9th beer-related business that has been here. We didn't know any of that moving in. So we bought it, and it became our collateral on a loan that allowed us to actually do something with it.
And the part about the loan, Bobby's sister, having been her previous job before she moved her family up from Oklahoma to start the brewery with us, she was a bank financer person. So she worked at a bank. And so she kind of knew a lot of the ins and outs of loans and such. And
so you bought the building first?
Yes.
Outright?
Yep. And then we used that as collateral for getting the loan. And then we put our houses on this collateral. I mean, both families put in everything. And now there are 3 families involved: Bobby's sister's family, your parents, and then us.
And just like to give some percentages, when you raised money or the money, how much of it went towards, say, renovating the building versus all the equipment in the back to actually brew beer?
Such a good question.
On a brewery, every business is different. I would say that probably 25 to 30% goes toward, let's speak to this business because even breweries can be different. We probably did 25 to 30% on equipment overall. And then the building overall plus renovation was probably 40%. And then the soft costs.
Oh my gosh, the soft costs.
So you can imagine you have attorneys and inspectors and engineers and in banking fees and on and on and on.
And this is where Bobby's sister was really helpful. She had that insider information about like all that soft costs. And so that's where it's like everything shiny is expensive, but people are just expensive.
So that's all about 20%.
And like all the different things that we had to pay for.
And then that extra 15% is that quote runway. And it's like anything else that if you don't hear anything else, anything about opening a brewery and you're listening to this podcast, is know that it will take you 4 times as long and cost 4 times as much. There should be a pause there. Make sure they hear that. It'll take 4 times as many years off your life.
And then when you sprinkle in a pandemic in the middle of it too,
that's in the operation phase.
That's at 8 times more.
Yeah. I'm not complaining. I love challenge, but holy smokes, I may have another life yet in consulting to open breweries because I know so much.
So what was the day that the brewery opened?
May 18th.
18th, because 19th was the biggest day. It was the craft beer walk.
2018.
18th, yeah.
I don't know what day it is.
We're coming up on our 6th.
Yeah. It was actually May 18th, but it was, we'd signed up for the craft beer walk sponsored by Appleton Downtown Incorporated, where folks can go from restaurant or bar or brewery spot to spot and just try these different craft beers. And
so we put a flag on, we put a pin on the calendar.
We did. We were like, all right, we will be open by then. And it was a race to the finish line to get opened. But we did it.
We weren't ready, but we were never going to be ready. We should have put that flag on the calendar a year up before that.
And we need to give shout out to 2 individuals. So we started this company. Bobby's family were invested and involved. His sister was running the business side. And then we had 2 friends of ours from Oklahoma. They moved up here, Shane Butner and Layla Cowper. And the 4 of us, I should say the 4 of you.
Yeah, you were doing something at this university down the road.
Yeah, that was the day job.
Yeah.
But Shane was brewing with you. Layla was going to run our tap room. Cindy was going to run all the books. And so we kind of had those pieces in place.
4 people doing 14 jobs.
Yeah, and all of us having no clue how to do any of them. The only thing I think we did know how to do is brew beer. And we actually couldn't even brew beer on site because we ran out of money and had to open quickly.
Speaking of relationships, we were brewing our beer at the Appleton Beer Factory for the first 9 months as I was building out all the production equipment. Yeah, we had to get it open. Mm-hmm. So we just put a door that separates from the production side of the business. And anyone that was here that first several months that we were open will remember there was this beautiful door at the end of the hallway, and behind it was a cluster. It was a construction zone.
Yep.
Yeah. We were trying to get that done piecewise. We're sitting now in the Prohibition Room, which is the upstairs of the brewery, and that came in another phase. So we were just building. We were building the plane while we were flying.
Mm-hmm. We finished the brewery or finished the Prohibition Room when I was 8 months pregnant. Because I remember painting the walls and getting my belly always like in the paint at the time.
So when you opened the doors, how many different beers did you have available?
4.
They were tall mast. There was our English IPA. They were our English mild. They were Pirates Cove, and they were Public House Pint. So we had an Irish stout, and we had a beer named after the building that burned down next door to us in the 80s. We'll talk about Pirates Cove later, I'm sure. Yeah, that was our first 4. And we had 16 lines. So a lot of them were empty, and there may have been a couple of guest taps that I
think we had some guest taps,
throughout the week, but yeah, and the cooler broke the first day.
Oh, I remember that.
It was the busiest day of the year for most people that were in the bar scene. We decided we'd open on it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course,
we had done a soft opening the day before. We had invited a bunch of Lawrence faculty who, I mean, and academics are fantastic because you say, okay, we're going to give you some discounted beer. You're going to help us out. But you're also going to fill out these little info cards, and they are so honest. It's wonderful.
It was the fourth time. We did 4 soft openings.
Oh,
with
that's
Lawrence.
right.
We're throughout construction. Every time we would get to what we would call a milestone, you can translate that as reason to drink, take a break from construction. We would have Lawrence come down and do a soft opening with us.
And that was really helpful because it was just such long hours. It was such hard work that to have people like in the brewery, and even if there was just construction debris everywhere, just have people there and for us to recognize like what we were still working towards.
Our goal.
That was the motivating lift we needed, I think, at times.
Yeah, and let's not talk about how hard it was completely. It's something a lot of people never get to experience, is the reward of their vision coming into reality. So that is worth it. That's the motto, the mantra of my life, is being able to make vision into reality.
I assume that when you opened, you were basically just serving beer on tap at first.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. We had growlers, but maybe not even that.
Yeah, there was no to-go options, but we had the 2 cask conditioned ale, so the beer engines were up and running.
Had 4 beer engines, but 2 in use. So it took a while even before the second 2 came into use.
How did you survive the pandemic?
We're fast forwarding, but not too far. It was 18 months.
Well,
Wait,
that's what I'm saying.
That question makes it sound like that it's over.
This was but you're here.
Oh, yeah,
so
we're still
survived.
open. We're still open. Yeah.
It was maybe not the worst time. So you opened in 2018.
Mhm.
Could have been worse, but
True.
it probably wasn't optimal.
Not optimal timing.
Because not too long after the pandemic hits,
Yep.
people can't come into the bar. Are you selling bottles and cans at this point?
Yes.
Well, I think
Kind
we're
of.
going to have to do a whole episode on this
Oh my
someday.
gosh.
we
yeah.
probably
Yeah.
can, but
Yeah. So we had switched over to we
Coincidentally,
we
we
had
started
already
canning about a month before the pandemic happened. And when I say we started canning, I don't mean that we got a canning machine and
we had a single canner.
We had literally a home brewing setup. We had some what we call beer guns, and we would fill 1 can at a time. And we had this seamer that you could put the lid on it, and you spun around. It did the double seam, 1 can at a time. And then we put these garage labels that would say whatever beer was inside it. Because we were starting to do some small batches. We had like a 30-gallon system we were starting to play with at that point. And
we wanted to increase options of to-go.
those were new beers.
In the tap
we didn't
room.
want to go to the length. We didn't have any marketing or graphics to work with at all back then. But people wanted to take these beers home. So we just had started doing that. Little did we know, 4 weeks later, that's the only thing we would be able to do to sell beer. So then that began, like I said, a very long period of time. But not to go too far down that path, we were open 18 months when it happened, when the pandemic struck effectively, because the news was already coming in November and December of 19. If we go back and look at that,
And we knew, Lawrence knew that they were going to close or at least not have students come back before Evers came out and said, we need to do absolute lockdown. I was using that information to kind of inform some of the choices that we were making.
We were already, as business owners, probably many other business owners, thinking that 2020 is going to be rough. I don't know that anyone predicted this or that what it was, but we all knew that this is something happening at the end of 19 was making waves at that point. So, where am I rambling off to now?
I have no idea.
Yeah. COVID. Maybe I'm going through all those memories in my head.
It's traumatic, but no, we learned a lot, and we had to change our business model almost overnight. And so I think that it changed the fate of the company.
100%.
But we're also optimists, and I think it changed it in a good way. We had to learn how to distribute overnight. And it flipped it. The business plan.
I started selling beer. So not only did we lose all the sales in our tap room overnight, and it became just to go only, and then they started to soften that over time, but also we lost all of our restaurants. We did have a couple of accounts out there that we were selling beer to in kegs. And of course they're gone now because they're not selling beer. So whatever avenue we had was slammed shut.
We even made a little COVID door where it's just with a little flap down. right outside the tap. We're actually right behind the bar, so people could like drive up and you can like get your beer handed to you.
Yep.
That door's still there. It's
still
fun.
there.
Nicknamed the COVID door.
It may or may not be the way that we share beers with the beer factory across the street, the alley, but today. It made us a distribution brewery earlier than we had hoped. That is, we got out throughout the state of Wisconsin selling. I was selling beer in 16 counties myself out of a $2,000 minivan that I still have. And we paid for
minivan. Oh my gosh.
20 times over. By the way, brewers, if you're out there listening, you're like, how do I do this? Buy a minivan. Don't spend more than $2,000. You can put 12 to 14 half barrels in the back of it and have low to ground access.
Bobby has a personal relationship with this minivan.
You've got to get over
rather inappropriate.
Get over your masculinity. It is the thing to have to deliver beer. It's built for 8 people and a ridiculous amount of weight. Also, full sheets of plywood. You can make the guy next to you embarrassed.
We have a rule here that we're not allowed to mention wood or any sort of, especially like oak in front of Bobby, or he'll start talking about wood.
That minivan got us through a lot of COVID, honestly. So I was selling beer everywhere because the bars were starting to open. I was starting to trickle out kegs here and there. And at the end of the day, when the dust settled, all of a sudden, we were open again. We were at, let's say, 60% of where we were before the pandemic struck. But now we are in 16 counties. And so this is a new business plan. And there's a picture of that I put on my own page, Facebook page, and it just shows business plan 2.0. And the people my friends, I think that's my most liked picture of all time. I'm not sure if they just like to see someone in that sort of agony, having to repeat all of this all over again, or they just saw the potential. But yeah, people's resonated with how resilient we were and how resolved we were.
Was it kind of a blessing in disguise? I mean, obviously the process sucked, but at the end of it, it's like, okay, now we're doing this thing that we never would have done before.
I can't answer that because I know that at the end of 19, our trajectory was ramping up so fast that I kind of wish we could have seen where that was going in our own space. It might have followed the business plan, which we haven't even really talked about, but it might have followed it really to the letter as much as you can. And they say you never follow your business plan, but I think we might have done it.
Yeah, we had to, because we were going to do distribution later. We were going to really focus on the tap room and the beer garden first. And that really didn't get to become what it is now until after the pandemic. And that would have flipped. We would have been able to invest a lot more time in at McFleshmans experience, but the pandemic stopped that. So I think, yes, I mean, we're optimists. So of course, yes, it was, we're better because of it. But I think we're also better because we learned how to pivot and
that word.
I know. And really think about what choices are we making now? Because at that point, our employees, paychecks were on the line because nothing was coming in unless we figured out how to do something quick.
I should say that we were so successful in 2020.
This is frustrating.
This is on, and I take credit for this because I was able to get this beer somewhere and get it sold, that we made more money in 20 than we made in 19, which for a startup isn't necessarily something to brag about, but it was something.
Not net.
And therefore, if you're a business owner, you probably know that you didn't receive a lot of the benefits because they looked at gross revenue. So
we didn't qualify for a
sword. It was a dagger to the heart.
Yeah.
So a lot of deductions.
But I know a lot of businesses that did not grow at all.
Yeah.
True.
And because I came from the travel space,
oh gosh,
they literally went to zero.
Yeah.
A hard zero.
Yeah.
And some of them never survived. So that, even if there's an asterisk next to it, is really not bad at all.
And it gave us, that's real growth. That's not bolstered by any sort of government program. So we knew we had something. And so we just kept going with that momentum and growing. Now we're in 45 counties and we're thinking about second tap rooms and selling the business of beer and conversation. And all of that came from these months in early 2020.
I remember when I started my business, my first business, you go through different phases. There's a phase where it's just like you, right? And then you hire some people, then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and your role changes. That there's a reason why there are people who are very good at running big companies. and there are people that are very good at startups, and they're not necessarily the same person. So the path you've taken is from when you've opened the door now almost 6 years ago to today. Are you finding that the business has changed dramatically and your roles and what you're doing have changed?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes, but I'm glad it has, because I'm not going to live forever and I'm going to have to change regardless. So it's just forcing me to figure out, how does succession look, and how does, how do our employees become owners?
Well, and one of the hard parts about the startup is that, well, like, take the four of you, Shane, Layla, and Cindy, you all had to figure out what hat to actually wear. Like, we didn't really have job descriptions. We kind of knew what lane everyone was supposed to be in, but in terms of your day-to-day activity, make it up as you go along, figure out the problem and go solve it, and make money while you're doing it, please. And so it was really hard for folks to adjust to what they were supposed to do. And it took us a while. It took Bobby a while, I think, but he became really good at recognizing when we needed to create a job. And then he'd go make that job, like distribution, for example, going around and selling the beer. And then he's like, okay, I've now made this job. I have these tasks. Now let's go hire someone that can fill that role. And he just kept moving throughout the brewery and doing
That's
that.
exactly how it's gone. I built the tap room, literally built a tap room. And then I put someone in place. This person also helped build that tap room. But what I'm getting at is, built that job, and then I go behind that door I talked about, and I start to build this production area out. And then I put a brewer in place there. And then I expand to this upstairs, and then I expand into sales and distribution, and then future expansion plans on tap rooms, so on and so forth. She's right. Every time I'd make these moves from one department to another, I'm laying the groundwork for that next person. Yeah.
So in the first episode, we began talking about beer, and you were tasting beer and drinking beer and making beer. Now we're talking about business.
Yes, we are. Yeah.
We haven't mentioned beer.
Right. So I want to go back to this, because I think I first came here, it must have been early 2021. I moved back to Appleton. I was originally born here. And the selection of beer here, I think there's maybe 16, 18 different beers on the menu, all of which are brewed here.
Mm-hmm.
Occasionally you may have a guest beer come in, make an appearance, but it's all here, all very different. You have, Irish stouts, English ales, IPAs, lagers,
Sours.
Yeah. I mean, it runs the gamut. So now back as a brewer, you're running the show. And we talked, a while back about recipes versus when you started, you were following someone's recipe. Now, are you making the recipes?
Sure.
And now are you in the mad scientist phase where you have your laboratory and you just get to do crazy stuff?
Yeah. And our scale is sort of at that precipice. So we're brewing enough and having to sell enough that you don't want to mess with it too much as a mad scientist. But I do.
Well, it's just like you've, okay, I'm going to experiment. We find a thing.
Yeah.
This works. We'll nail that down.
Oh, gosh.
Let's not, mess with this, but continue to
she's
keep creating
pointing
stuff.
at me. So
the number of times. So we nicknamed Bobby as Ahab, and he goes after Moby Dick, which Moby Dick for a long time was Tall Mast, our English IPA. He kept tweaking it, just little bitty changes here and there and yonder. And our brewer at the time, Shane, just got so frustrated at him that Shane would just be like, "Oh, Bobby's messing with Tall Mast again." I mean, there was many mornings where I would wake up and I hadn't even had my coffee yet, and all of a sudden there's a beer thrust in my face. And he's like, "Try this." And I was like, "God damn it. No." I think that he's never going to let it go and he's never satisfied, I think. Even our Pirates Cove you've been messing with lately, even though I'm very mad that you are. Don't mess with Pirates Cove.
Well, you have okay. I was listening to Dan Carey on his podcast. He's him and Deb Carey own
New Glarus.
And he says, once you get a recipe that sells, laminate it and walk away. So I'm trying to take that into account. He's a very, very good brewer, and he's a very smart guy. That said, I'm not entirely sure I believe it, because we deal with agricultural products. and we have to make the same product every time, and there's variability. So you gotta roll with some curveballs. So what do you mean by laminated? But I won't go down that road. Each brewer has to find for themselves how much they want to be an industrial type, technical type, and how much they want to be an artistic type. And I don't know if I'm one more than the other. I feel like I'm constantly artistically thinking on one side, literally of my brain, but on the other.
The other thing about
execute it.
When we first opened versus now is you and the other brewers that we've had on the team have gotten to know the equipment much more.
Yeah.
As well as, I mean, there is an execution that, you want to be able to, brew the same beer based on the recipe, but the system itself has efficiencies. And then we added our open fermenter, which really changed the game, especially with the English ales. And so I think it just, as you all have become more skilled, you're more practiced. I think our recipes have also reflected that.
And we know our brand better, and it lets us make big global decisions better as to which styles to pursue to begin with. I was just thinking as we're talking, there's also a business brain, right? There's a technician and there's the artist. Now I've got a pie that's split three ways, and I have this business brain. And this business brain has figured out how to use those other two parts of my brain. It says, oh, okay, well, you're going to have to actually make some money, and you're going to have to put people's mind at ease so you don't have Shane complaining about tweaking your recipes. We need to get some mainstays that don't change, and we need to make that more feasible so it has economies of scale and it gets wider and gets a wider audience.
Defending Shane a little bit, the beer was great, and you were like, but if I just do this one
I'm not throwing
thing,
Shane under the bus. No, everybody has to deal with that with me.
Does making greater, is that word? Why?
Yeah, that's that artistic brain. Yeah, but see, that business owner understands that you need both. You need that scale, and you need that revenue, and you need that marketing and so forth. But it also understands that the artistic brain is driving the brand.
Well, if you ever touch MSB, I will divorce you.
Yeah, if I would never tell her, I promise you I will never tell you if I mess with MSB.
So you went from beer enthusiast, home brewer, student of beer, opened the brewery. I'd say your brewery now is established. It's sort of found its groove. What do the next 5 years hold?
Well,
not changing MSB. Number one.
Well, I was telling Allison last night that we have done this 5 years, and now it's time to sell our brand. We for so long it was pushed.
We're not selling the brewery. Just
no, not the brewery. Yeah, no. Sell our brand to make shirts for fans to buy and wear. We have ambassadors out there that want to support us. They've seen what we've been through. They like our story. And it's why we're doing this podcast, because now I think we have content. I think now there's more pull in some sense than push. And I think that's kind of abstractly what we're going to do in the next 5 years.
I think embrace our fans and really start to see where they want to take it too.
Because I've been here some nights where there have been people from out of state who just show up and it's like, I've heard about this place. I needed to.
Oh my gosh, seriously? Oh, that's so great. Oh, yeah. Well, that's so great.
And I know I can tell you guys are obviously building a reputation. Both, it's people from around Wisconsin and from outside of Wisconsin who come here. Yeah, I'm very curious to see where you take it over the next 5 years.
So are we.
Likewise. When we opened, we didn't know there was going to be this 3-year speed bump that the pandemic really created. So let's hope we don't get any of those. But on its own, I think it's bright. I think we have a well-defined brand. And that's something that, too, if you're opening a business, is you have to find out how much you want to laminate what you think you're going to do and stick with that, because there is a certain component of that.
That's true. We do make hazies now.
Well, versus bending to the market. You've got to find what's the right balance. And if we were in Chicago, we might have 10 beer engines and nothing else, for example.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
But you can't do that in a town where you need to supply all the styles, because you're one of 3 breweries or 4 breweries at this point.
And I should add in part of the brand that, as I see it isn't just that you're making beer. You have some very knowledgeable people behind the bar. You're literally doing courses on the history and the science of beer.
Beer school.
That there's there's kind of more to it that like, it's kind of, if you're a beer lover, this would be the place for you.
Our sign says respecting the beer. This podcast says respecting the beer. I always think of us as a brewery for brewers. When I see our sign, it would never translate, but in my mind, I want to be a brewery for brewers. That doesn't matter whether you're a professional or a home brewer or maybe just an enthusiast of beer, but I think of us in that way.
It's true. When we it's so fun to give people tours, which we normally don't do, but if we're in a conversation or something, let's take you to the back and we'll show you. It's fun to take homebrewers back there because they look up at the equipment and they're so excited. But then we know immediately if they're an actual brewer, a professional brewer, because the first thing they do is they look at the floor and they're like, oh, look at this floor. Because it's a very special type of floor that's specific to breweries, for breweries.
For the floor drains. It's one of those two things. Yeah. If you're a brewer, that's what you're going to notice.
Yeah, it's really funny. But then that particular floor is actually the same floor, or the same batch of tile even, that was at Sierra Nevada. North Carolina. Maybe
someday we'll talk about the construction of the place. But
yes.
Yeah, there's a whole story there.
But anyway, so it's really fun to see, like, to get to engage with folks, both from the pro brewer side, but also from the beer lover side.
Well, I think this is a good place to wrap up the McFleshmans origin story then. I know that for all these things we talked about, there's a lot more we can get into, and we will in the future, whether it's about beer or business or brewing. Thanks for your time, and we'll be talking a whole lot more about beer.
Woohoo!
Fabulous.